Welcome to episode number 7 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast, Canada versus American Prepping. My name is Eric. I'm the host of the show. I'm based in Southern Ontario. I'm a hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, VE3 EPN for those other ham operators out there, and computer geek. I got into preparedness when I was working frontline emergency services and witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events such as ice storms, power outages, etc. I started a small preparedness company to help people get prepared and able to look after themselves for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
My name is Ian. I'm co-host of the show. I live on Vancouver Island on a small hobby farm. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, target shooter, reloader, and my farm's designated handyman. I've had lifelong interest in preparedness, and I'm gladly learning new skills on a regular basis. My professional background has allowed me to see every province and territory in Canada and has taught me to prepare for various unexpected situations daily. Doing this podcast, I should also mention that this has taught me that I talk fast and I need to enunciate.
Well, we've got some great content for you in this episode. Hopefully Ian will slow it down as well to get the content out there. We're going to start off with some news articles related to preparedness and the outdoors. Next, we'll be letting you know how we've improved our preparedness since the last episode. And we're going to get into the main topic of the episode, the differences in preparing between the US and Canada. So, news. This may take a while. We've got some riots in France and Europe. Not really about gas tax, is it?
Not at all. It's funny how the media started off saying it was all about the introduction of a fuel tax, and they offered to repeal it for 6 months, which is, of course, meaning it's still coming in, and they still kept on rioting. They repealed it completely. And, lo and behold, they're still rioting. So it's very interesting to see what's progressing there.
Yeah, it is. Especially when what they said they were rioting about has been repealed and they're still rioting. That's interesting.
Yeah, the interesting thing to watch is the signs that they're holding up as well. I mean, it's everything from basically F off Macron to various other things, but basically it's a non-confidence in the whole government at this point, and it's certainly, I don't think it's going to abate anytime soon. The interesting thing is that it's certainly come to Canada now, and it's turns out there's one in Nanaimo, which is only about 15 minutes away from my house, and yet not a single peep about it on the mainstream media.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen a few posts too throughout Facebook just mentioning different yellow vest gatherings all over the place. Recent one I saw was just in Alberta where they had one going on, and it's certainly kind of starting to catch up here too. And maybe they'll know exactly what they're riding for, and maybe they won't.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching a really bit of a raunchy YouTube channel, but anyways, his name's Danger Cats, and he's actually talking. He had some live footage. Normally, he's very coarse humor, but he actually had a pretty serious one about the yellow vest riots going on, not riots, but protests right now going in on Grand Prairie, Alberta, and there's about a couple thousand people sitting there in the crowd, and I think they said 400 vehicles driving through town and doing a procession over it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was a little bit more widespread than I guess I think that anybody's letting on at this point, which is, of course, interesting in itself. But I guess a couple things we should talk about this with the actual riot perspective too, eh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just as far as the preparedness perspective is, if you all of a sudden find yourself in that kind of scenario, just having sort of a plan to get yourself out and be prepared for what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of the simple gray man theory. Guys trying to not stick out from the crowd. It's kind of a worst case scenario for you if you get caught up in something like that. I mean, worst case, of course, you could be worse, trampled or whatever have you, but separated from your loved ones is a problem. A friend of mine who's actually a prepper here in Nanaimo, he got caught up in the Stanley Cup riots, probably a decade ago now, I guess. And interesting because his apartment was right above it, so even trying to get home, he got caught up in these riots.
Oh yeah, don't have much of a choice. If your house is right there, then you're going to be in the thick of it no matter what. Another thing to think of too, even if you're not a part of the rioting or you just happen to get caught up in it, there's the chance of maybe getting caught up in some incapacitating gases or some kind of crowd dispensing activity that's being put on by law enforcement that you're not even there to riot, but you happen to be in the area at the time. So something to keep in mind as well as could be happening.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how much you support something like that, I don't think it's a good idea at this point if you're trying to keep a low profile, as naturally most preppers I think do. That basically, if you get a criminal charge by being caught up in something like that, I mean, that's certainly, down the States, if you have a federal felony charge, it's no NICS check for you, so no firearms. And up here, if you're applying or renewing a PAL, I think if you have a criminal charge, it's either going to slow down the process or it's just not going to happen for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, here, criminal charge most likely equals no PAL, right? And at that point, you're done. So, and it's hefty bill too, just to go through the court system if you're looking to fight things.
Well, I guess that's where, from a preparedness perspective, you should maybe get some legal insurance from the CCFR for it covers renewal failure to renew your PAL, I guess, as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think it covers all kinds of different things for you if you happen to forget some paperwork or you end up on the wrong side of things. They'll help represent you.
Yeah, too. I think as well as should I say in the Facebook crowd and everything else, if you're caught with your picture, your smiling face in the middle of a ride as well, I think that could certainly affect your job or your social standing or anything else, or even just like the attitude of people towards you in general.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And just take a second to mention here that I've lost the live chat portion of the YouTube feed here, so I had to close it off. It was mirroring exactly what we were saying, so it was causing a bit of an echo on my side of things.
Okay. The interesting thing is you can do with that is you can mute the actual YouTube video itself on the other screen, and that'll help.
Well, that's what I didn't do, and then I just closed it. So anybody sitting in there, I apologize. I won't be seeing any comments. I don't know if you've got it open on your end there, Ian. But
no, I can open it up for sure. I guess the other thing we didn't cover off there too is I guess if you're going to get caught up in something like that, whether it was voluntary or not, is that it certainly provides a cover when the police are busy trying to deal with rioters. That other crimes could certainly occur during that time, whether it be an assault on you, your loved ones, or even just as simple as a mugging. You just don't want to be caught up in that crowd at all.
Oh no, absolutely not. Yeah, law enforcement will have their hands filled with dealing with the crowds and dispersing all that's going on, and little smaller things that are going on will definitely be on the backlog. So it's definitely a head on a swivel type of scenario where you want to keep an eye on yourself and loved ones and have a plan and put it in motion for that sort of thing.
Well, I guess one thing that's finally did get covered by the mainstream media is our next news article.
Yeah, so we got a news article here from the National today, and it's in regards to the looming of a financial crisis. So I'll just read a little excerpt from it here. The International Monetary Fund is warning that another global recession looms on the horizon, even as governments and global institutions remain woefully underprepared for the next financial crisis. So I think we were talking earlier just in the pre-show there about the fact that if mainstream media is starting to report on this, it's probably something that we're going to see happen sooner than later.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of paranoia at this point. If the mainstream media is covering it, usually it's by then it's already underway. And if they're telling you they're not prepared for it, that's certainly a big red warning flag for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's mainstream media picking up, running with it. We could talk for years as preppers about how the economic collapse is going to happen, and get ready for it. But as soon as mainstream media picks it up, it's time to really pay attention to things.
Yeah, and it was even covered by CBC, which normally, thanks to recent payouts from the government, I mean, they do nothing but pro-government articles all the time. So I'm actually surprised they covered something like that. That was actually well-rounded journalism. It was well done.
Shocking for CBC.
Yeah. So on the other end of the spectrum from the media, I got something from RT, Russia Television. So, I mean, I figure if you're going to watch mainstream media, you should at least watch it from all ends, or at least a variety of ends, and usually somewhere in the middle lies the truth, because they're all biased to a way, shape, or form, just like we are.
Oh, exactly. They got to sell ads, right? So to sell ads, you got to write your articles to the people that are going to read them.
Yeah, so I picked one out from RT that says inflation hits over 1,000,000% in Venezuela. I have the link in the show notes there, and I do have to kind of giggle because at that point they might as well just be saying it's a gajillion% a year or a month, because, I mean, at that point, how can you possibly pay for anything with cash? I do believe right now the current stories that are filtering out is that basically if you order a meal, you have to pay for it at the beginning of the meal, because by the end of the meal, the price has changed.
Oh, wow.
And then the other thing too is I guess they had actually I've got a bit of a documentary. I should put the link for that as well. And there's a documentary right now that shows if you're filling up with gas in Venezuela, even though it's basically free, the gas, because it's states subsidized so heavily, if you want to pay for the gas, they won't take cash at all now. They will just take barter items. They'll take eggs, they'll take knives, guns, whatever. And you can fill up a tanker truck of gas, like, multi-thousand-gallon tank of gas for about $17.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, naturally, the capitalism prevails. The guys finally figured out they could do that, drive it across the border to Colombia and sell it for a profit.
Yeah, $17 for that amount of gas. Yeah, I could see you making some money on that.
Yeah, so I just thought it was just a funny thing about how, at this point, they have to call it at some point, but they decided to do a last ditch effort, which was called the petro cryptocurrency, and they're trying to base down their oil reserves. But I mean, who's going to have any faith in this at this point for Venezuela? I think they're pretty much done as
Yeah.
far as economy goes.
Hey, take a crack at cryptocurrency. Why not? Everybody else is right now.
Yeah, worked for Bitcoin, didn't it?
Yeah, for a certain period of time there. Yeah, not so great now, but
yeah,
good a few years ago. So
all
maybe we'll
right.
get into what we've done lately.
All right. So for myself, I went to a local store called Industrial Paint and Plastics for some gamma lids and buckets. It's actually a funny little store because when I first moved to this area, I heard their radio ad, and they actually said specifically that they were catering to preppers as well, which I was like, huh? And so
Really? Right in the ad.
I was like, okay, let's go check it out. And they have actually an amazing assortment of everything from various empty containers with different lids to the gamma lids, obviously in the buckets, used, 500-gallon liquid storage tubs, everything else, even like soy sauce barrels that you can like rinse out and reuse. And it's actually a very interesting place. I mean, the prices are fairly good, and the service is fantastic. So we try and go there as often as we can. And so we use those buckets and the gamma lids to complement the rice we decided to grab at Costco recently. And yeah, that was it for food. See here, I had an interesting meetup with a local prepper here. Not too often that happens, actually. It was great. Been messaging back and forth with a guy on International Preppers Network there. And he was local, turns out. And we got messaging back and forth. It turns out we'd actually worked together at a different company over 20 years ago. And so we actually knew each other fairly well. And but
That's wild. Small world.
Yeah, we didn't know we were on the plan for sure with each other. And so I had him up to the farm right away because the trust level gets amped right up when you realize that you know the guy fairly well.
Yep.
So anyways, I got him to come up and give him a little tour of the Doomstead, and it was fantastic. So I'm glad he showed up.
Oh, awesome! It's a small world.
Yeah, well, it certainly is. It's actually quite amazing. I guess a couple other things I did. I arranged with the local arborist to remove a couple of the high risk trees around the house. We had one that was, well, it's BC, right? So it's probably about 120 feet high. And when we first moved in, I was kind of afraid to take it down due to my lack of skills with forestry. And then it's gotten worse and worse, kind of leaning over the house. And as far as a fire break goes, it's kind of standing in the way of me getting a proper fire break around the house for forest fires. So I got them to show up, and they well, obviously took care of that as well as a couple other problem trees. So it increases my wood stockpile from next year.
Nice. It's awesome to watch them work too, eh?
Oh, fantastic! Actually, I helped them out a little bit because I learned about
Yep.
20 different things as far as how to bring down higher trees. And yeah, they're great guys. I've had them over a few times, and they're pretty much on the plan as well. They work for cash, which is always nice.
Oh, yeah. I had an arborist by 2 years ago, I think it was now, take a big tree out in the front yard. And he just looked at me and said, "Where do you want it?" I said, "Well, on the ground would be good." He said, "Well, no, whereabouts?" And I said, "Well, kind of in the area where the tree is now." And he dropped it literally in a pile beside the stump of the tree. It was impressive. Just one guy. It's awesome to watch.
Mad skills, but of course, I guess if they're doing it nonstop, it helps, right?
True, yeah. Yeah, I'd still be trying if it was me taking it down.
So, of course, why do I mention that as far as a preparedness thing? It's like, I guess, peace of mind for the tree not coming down in a windstorm onto the house. Cost savings for the heat. I guess we'll get enough wood for that. Probably run the house, probably heat the house for about I'd say at least a couple weeks on just that one tree alone.
That's good.
And the wood shavings and the food, basically the tree comes down and bounces about once on the ground, and the local alpacas we have here on the acreage, they come running and they start eating the pine needles, which is offsets my food cost for them.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I did, I was supposed to go target shooting. That got canceled rather abruptly when I realized that I'd washed my passport in the mail again.
Ooh.
Why do I mention that? Well, it was a very, very interesting thing. I mean, I'm required to have one for work, so it is kind of an important document for me. But it actually, for me, it was highlighting the importance of community as well, because basically I needed to get pictures taken, references done, guarantors signed off. I actually had to get a notary public to sign off that I was me and I had actually washed it. And so I had to get all this done in about 2 or 3 hours before close of business, and then rush over the next morning to get it done so I could get back in time, because I had to go to work basically, well, within 48 hours. And so the importance of community is having people like that, reliable people like that ready to go. It was fantastic. So it really came in handy.
Got it all done within a couple hours. That's impressive.
Yeah, and so I was, I guess contacts of any sort help, but I mean,
Yeah.
people that are willing to drop tools and help you out at the drop of a hat is very important to have.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So
For
what?
me, I just got out to the shooting range for the first time in forever, and a buddy of mine called me up and just said, "Hey, you know what? Dues are due for the range." Oh yeah. So we figured we'd go out and get them paid off, and then we put about 100 rounds each of 9 mil down range, and mostly on target. A few got tossed, but for the most part, on paper where I wanted them to be. So that was good, and I completed the podcast challenge myself. So I've got enough fuel stored now in the garage to fuel the truck up and fuel up the skidoo if I need it, and fuel up the snowblower. So we're good to go.
Actually, it's very interesting. That's a perishable skill, of course, and I don't go to the range as much as I would like for sure. Because other things around the farm keep me distracted as well. But definitely a perishable skill, isn't it?
Oh, is it ever? Yeah, getting back in. Like I haven't been to the range in, well, I want to say 3 or 4 months, and yeah, just getting back into the groove. It took a couple of magazines and finally got back into it, and the holes are going where I wanted them after a couple of rounds, so that was good. I hadn't completely lost it yet, but the first couple down were not exactly where I wanted them. But yeah, it's funny how quickly you lose it.
Oh, for sure. The what type of skidoo do you have? Is like a larger one, or just like the Yamaha Bravo types, or?
I've got a 2007 Ski-Doo MXZ. It's an 800.
Okay, that's good. So you get haul a little toboggan behind it and everything else.
Good. Yeah, it's got enough power to haul a little toboggan if I need. I've got a little bag set up on it, so when we're out sledding, I got a little kit ready to go. Because what kind of prepper would I be if I didn't have a kit with me out in the Skidoo, right? So got that with me.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's kind of funny because the reason I ask is, I mean, back to that embarrassing hunting episode. I when I did go caribou hunting up in northern Saskatchewan back in the day, actually I had a little Yamaha Bravo, so it was about as small a skidoo as you could get, and even then I was still able to haul a fairly decent sized toboggan behind it. I was actually kind of surprised.
Oh, nice. I carry spare fuel of mine too, which has come in handy. A couple of times, I usually go out riding with a few people, and on more than one occasion, they've run out of fuel. So I've been able to at least top them off and get them into a town somewhere where we can fuel up again.
Excellent. So I guess it's time for the main topic, isn't it?
That's the main topic. Yeah. So this is going to be an interesting one. The differences between the Canadian and American prepper. Do we start off with just knocking a couple of shows, or what do we do?
Oh, I don't know where to begin sometimes. I guess
Doomsday prepper, anybody?
Yeah, Doomsday Preppers. We could talk about a few other. I mean, even the Alone one. Or is it no? What's it? Alone up in northern Vancouver Island when they were doing that one.
Yeah, I watched that one. Yeah.
So it's kind of a crossover show in the fact that they had American preppers up in Canada. Interesting. The fact is that I guess they weren't used to the cool climate. They weren't used to a bunch of other things. So I mean, obviously, I guess we should start right off with climate. That'll be the biggest challenge right off the bat for as far as differences go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just the swing in different temperatures that the states would have versus us. Just going from Michigan to Florida, for example, you're going to be dealing with nice warm palm trees, and then Michigan getting snow like we would.
Everything from I'd say a variety of climate down there. They have a variety of wildlife available. Everything from poisonous snakes to muskox in Alaska and everything else. So I would say they definitely have a larger variety. But to generalize, I guess we could say that they have water and heat issues in the southern 48, and I guess we could probably say as a general rule, there's certain exceptions as well, but we have extreme cold to deal with and growing season issues in a lot of Canada where we don't have a giant growing season.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's that. The fact that the prepper culture is pretty well established there versus here would be a big difference as well. It's nothing to really be talking to anybody in the States, and like being like the emergency preparedness thing is just something that's almost second nature to them versus here it's just slowly starting to kind of catch on.
Oh yeah, for sure. Actually, go back to my first point in the show notes there. I had to kind of laugh. I asked you before the show if we should, how apolitical we should stay on this. So I'm going to try my best here. And so, anyways, the difference is, I guess, between Canada and the U.S., if you want to go deep back into our history, is I guess the difference between Canada and the U.S. is, they fought and ended up with they fought the British Empire and ended up with a bunch of rights. I guess we came cap in hand in 1982 and asked for stuff and we got privileges. So I guess there's a big difference right off the bat is rights versus privileges in each country.
Yeah, this is true. And so, if you want to get right into it about the right to bear arms, I see it on the list here. We may as well hit the hot topic button.
Yeah, everything from free speech. I mean, we don't really have free speech in Canada because, I mean, anything you say could technically be construed as hate speech against something or some object or whatever. Whereas down the States, I think they're surprisingly a little more tolerant of it. And I mean,
true.
they don't want to hear it half the time, but they have to put up with it because they do actually have a right to, like a proper right to free speech, a proper right to bear arms. We have to really walk on eggshells with a lot of stuff in Canada. So even, I was actually talking to another friend of mine today, and he's very hesitant to come on the podcast. I don't blame him, because there is a stigma attached in Canada that is not, quite present in the States. There's operational security issues here. There's all sorts of other things. So, I mean, definitely right off the bat, a difference in the rights.
Oh, absolutely.
On the next point there, you want to cover that one?
Yeah, Property Rights and Emergency Management Act and your supplies. That those definitely are different compared to the States for Canada.
Well, yeah, I guess the number one thing with the property rights is, under the Emergency Management Act, they can literally come in case of a local emergency or a nationwide one. They can come in and take whatever they feel they need to service the population, whether it be your food, your water supplies, whatever have you. In the States, it's a little more of a castle doctrine going on. So, of course, unlike us, we generally have more uniform laws. They have various laws depending on the state.
Yeah, and it's that's the one thing I find interesting with them is just state to state, it can be completely different. Whereas Canada, the province to province changes here and there. But for the most part, we've got the one big blanket code, and it covers everybody with some minor variations. But the states, you can be completely night and day from one state to the other.
Well, yeah, because I think back when we were doing our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, one thing specifically excluded was property rights in Canada, which I still think is one of our biggest gaffes. But I guess compromise was the order of the day. There's something called a kitchen conference that they did that actually came up with a notwithstanding clause, which basically negates any rights that are in the Charter if you really come down to it. So it's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, you can ask Doug Ford about that one.
Yeah, exactly. The notwithstanding clause. And the other thing I was going to say, with the supplies itself, the variety from state to state. To give you a prime example, down in, I think it's Oregon, they're not allowed to do rainwater collection.
I'd heard that, yeah.
Period, which is mind-blowing because, you think that, well, for us, it's just like what's falling from the sky. It's whatever. And whereas they're quite convinced in Oregon that rain belongs to the state, and that's just the way it is. If you don't like it, leave the state. And
that's crazy.
Which is definitely a difference from here. I think people are a little more grounded when it comes to that. I mean, I'm surprised they haven't taxed it here yet, but give them time.
They might try one day.
Yeah.
If they do, we'll start talking about it on the podcast.
That's right. Next one.
So we've got likelihood of running into a CCW. I don't know what you mean by CCW, so I'll just read it out.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Concealed carry weapon.
Gotcha. Okay.
So basically, even in good times, I mean, chances are if it's just a short-term emergency, chances are there's going to be somebody around you concealed carry, unless you're in California or Illinois, maybe New York. But in most of the states, good chance that somebody in the crowd is packing heat, whereas generally in Canada, with the exception of Jane and Finch and a couple of the choice locales, most people don't. So I guess...
And those that do are doing it non-lawfully.
Exactly.
You're not going to come across very many people with a concealed carry permit. They're very rare.
I think there's only about 80 in Canada that there's actually have authorizations to carry. I mean, other than the usual police, military, everybody else, but
brings all those guys.
Yeah, so special purpose guys, like there's prospectors, a couple politicians, and that's about it. There's really not a whole lot.
Yeah.
So basically the likelihood of running into somebody, whether it be like a long-term emergency, short-term emergency, I think initially in the States, it's more likely you're going to run into somebody like that. In a long-term emergency, I think, well, pretty much everything goes out the window, and maybe it might be the same in both countries. Yeah,
no, that's definitely a big difference for Canada versus the States. Is, like you said, pretty much anybody in the States could be packing from, anybody right up to your grandmother could be walking around with something in their purse or something on their hip, and you might know, you might not, and it's really it's not something that you really think of in Canada. Like, I didn't even know what you meant by CCW.
Well, I mean, and even some states have the open carry. I mean, constitutional carry. So, I mean, you're going to run into that. You're going to run into people with truck guns, whether it be hanging in the gun rack in the back window or just hidden in the back seat of the car or whatever have you. Here, I think if you do get pulled over, it's usually a bit of explaining to do, unless you're on the way to the range or whatever have you. I mean, it's not illegal in Canada, but it's usually generally there has to be kind of a valid reason for a truck gun per se. As long as you can talk your way out of that, that's fine. But in the States, it's just normal. It's expected. Yeah, it's just a common thing, and it's like a social norm type of thing. Whereas here, like you and I will go to the range and not think of anything about having a firearm in the car with us, but you tell a couple of people that I'm going to the range and bringing my gun with me. I'm like, what? You're taking it out of the house? Oh my God! It's such a different thing. You can do that?
You can do that? Yeah. What do you mean? It leaves the house? Well, yeah, I got to use it out of range, so it's got to leave the house.
Yeah, so this one's a little touchy. The next one, I guess I'll handle it off the bat.
Sure.
There is the stereotype, and there is actual statistical proof behind it. But I would say that there is an education level difference between Canada and the States, not just of geography, which is always a running joke on a lot of TV shows, but also just world events. I think in the States, it's not a matter of being stupid or anything else. I think there's tend to be a little more insular and more, I guess, isolationist. They always have been versus us. We seem to have a little more broad perspective as far as what's going on around the world. Down in the States, if you ask most people about Canada, they really don't have a whole lot of idea of what's going on up here.
I like watching some of those YouTube videos where they go down and ask the Americans different things about Canada, and they totally make facts up and then get them to, oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, congratulations on the giant snow house in Ottawa and everything else. It's just, yeah, talking to Americans was a funny one, but and I'm not knocking Americans. It's just the problem is that it's just a cultural thing. I think they just looked a little more inward than we tend to look outward as more of a multicultural society. I don't know how
that could be it. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, they're not multicultural either. I just trying to figure out. There is a difference though, for sure. I've noticed.
Absolutely, there is. Yeah.
Material costs for prepping. So I guess. Oh yeah, you heard that, eh?
Oh yeah, I can hear the pooch barking there in the back.
I'll go see if I can bribe him. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. But the material costs for sure. That's something that it's a little bit different. Ammunition would be something that you'll see a definite price change on between the U.S. and Canada. I was just saying in there that the price difference between ammunition in Canada versus the U.S. is something that you would notice right off the bat, and even the availability of ammunition in the U.S. versus Canada is something that's different.
Well, yeah, I mean, nothing frustrates me more than going on to Amazon.com versus .ca and seeing the difference in price. And I'm actually, one thing my wife told me to mention on the podcast here is even the availability of certain things, like whether it be books or whatever have you. I mean, back in the old days, they used to burn books they didn't agree with, and now it seems in the tech age, they just make sure they're not available in certain countries.
Yep.
And I don't think my wife's subject choice is way out there or anything else. It's just that if it doesn't agree with the current mantra in society or the current way the government wants to run things, it's very interesting the fact that it's just not available anymore. And
disappears.
But yet they'll deliver from Amazon.com from the States up, so it's very interesting that way.
Yep.
And the other thing I was going to mention, like you mentioned, the material costs. Again, I talked about Costco a couple of weeks ago there. It's shocking sometimes how much that de minimis law, when it comes to customs and NAFTA, how much of a difference that can make.
Absolutely. It's just going into a Costco in the States versus Costco in Canada, and even with the conversion, looking at some of the items, it's a huge difference.
Well, the good news is they did change that a little bit with the NAFTA agreement, the new, what do they call that new one? Anyway, the new de minimis law, it allows up to $200 duty free. So I think the cost.
Oh, that's right, that did change, yeah.
Yeah, so it went from 20 to 200. So it's still dated and it's still not enough, but at least it should help with small items.
It's better than what it was, so we'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, trespass laws.
Yes, those are completely different in Canada versus the States. The whole Castle Law versus Citizen Self-Defense and Protection of Property Act.
Yeah, so we didn't even really have much of a Castle Law until the Conservatives came up with that long-winded act.
Yep.
But interesting, down the States, it can vary again from state to state. But you might see something as simple as just a 2-door rule. If the person goes through 2 doors, you can do whatever you want with them. To obviously you have to give them a warning, whatever have you. Yep. In Canada, it's a very long-winded, convoluted thing where yes, you can protect yourself if A equals B equals C, and if you don't go through every motion required by the act, you're in a bit of trouble.
Yep. And the moon has to align with the sun, and all kinds of things have to happen, and you're still going to end up in court no matter what.
Yeah. So. Like a punishment by process, I do believe they call that, right?
I believe that's the way they would put it, yes.
Yes. So, I guess we talked about the social stigma too, didn't we, before?
We kind of touched on the social stigma there, just the fact that, in Canada, it's still not really a mainstream thing versus in the States. It's pretty normal to have a prepper just say right out, yeah, that's what I do. And they all kind of, it's like a social norm thing versus here, it's still just kind of catching on.
Yeah, so we touched on climate as well, but one thing I just wanted to mention is to add to that climate difference is the solar efficiency. So I mean, you're down in a place like Nevada. I mean, not only is the latitude better, so you're going to get more efficiency per square meter in a place like that. You're probably going to have a little drier climate in the entire southwest of the state, so you're going to get a lot more solar efficiency. The minimized seasonal changes. So I mean, in California, the difference between summer and winter is maybe 10, 15 degrees. Here in Canada, you go to a place like Winnipeg, it can be plus 30 or it can be minus 40. Like they've seen both. So
absolutely. Brings up another thing is as far as food storage for the climates. In Canada, you're dealing with that big swing, so you could go all of a sudden from, you said, nice temperatures to store food to minus 40, where it could potentially be destroying your food stock. So you have to bring some stuff in. You have to maybe shuffle stuff around depending on the season.
Well, I think I'd rather take our climate over theirs for food storage. Simply the fact is that, generally a lot of parts of Canada are dry. And then, geez, I'm going to let him go again. Most of the, parts of Canada, it's like usually dry, cooler, whereas in the States, they got to deal with rot issues for sure.
Sorry, I don't know if you're picking the vacuum up there in the background.
No, it seems we both have noise distractions going on right now. So,
oh, well, we'll fight through it.
Yeah. So
what else do we got here on the list? So, food storage. What else do we have here?
Well,
a politeness level, yes.
It's very, very stereotypical for sure. So, I mean, we can talk about being, how do you get a Canadian to say I'm sorry? It's you step on his toes, right?
Yep.
And so there is that. That's the running joke. But I mean, down the States, cultural difference again. Somebody says you say thank you to somebody in the States, they say no problem or yep. Whereas up here, I'd say you're welcome, and it can lead to a bit of cultural clash if you're not used to it or whatever have you.
Oh, absolutely, and of course, Canadians are always made fun of for just profusely apologizing for anything and everything, right?
Oh, so sorry about that, but anyway, it's just the perceived politeness of it. Also internationally, I guess a lot more people do speak multiple languages in Canada, and you've also got more of a unilingual culture in the States.
Yeah, true. Yep. As well, as far as open spaces go, population density lower, way lower in Canada. So once you're out of the major cities, the chance of coming into some solitude is pretty high. In the bigger cities, obviously not so much, but that's something that's different in Canada versus the States.
Well, I think we're on the order of about 14 people per square kilometer, and down the States, it's almost 10 times that. Yep. And because it's pretty similar square mileage when you count in Alaska, but the population is literally 10 times higher. We've got chances for solitude as well, like you mentioned. Chances are you won't run into somebody in a lot of places, but usually worse climate and worse terrain to cover, like the muskeg. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been up to that stuff at all, but it's.
I haven't been.
It's like walking through thick mud all the time, and same thing. A good maybe quarter of Canada is above the tree line, so no trees whatsoever. And I don't think they're seeing that in the States unless you're in a desert. No,
true, yeah. What else we got?
Well, the guy that came up and visited me here, Vic Prepper 11, he mentioned one that actually I thought we should include as well. He just says, the difference in the States between firearms laws. So not even so much a Canadian versus American thing, except for in the States, it can vary hugely between everything from concealed carry to what guns you're allowed to own and everything else. Here in Canada, it's a federally regulated thing. So literally, I mean, with the exception of the odd holdout like Quebec's registry and stuff, it is uniform across the board.
Oh, that's interesting. What else we got? Bail and legalization in Canada?
Oh, bail and legislation.
Oh, legislation. Sorry. Yeah, legislation. I can't read tonight.
Yeah, no worries. So back in 2013, the Conservatives, I'll pick on every political party just to make sure I just
why not? We'll even it all out.
Yeah,
Equal Opportunity Podcast.
That's right. So, bail and legislation was brought in 2013 by the Conservatives, and basically what it said is, if any systemically important bank runs into trouble, we'll just take your money to pay them off. And so, which is fantastic. And of course, they did it in Europe and a few other places. Cyprus was a notable place where they've actually activated it. And whereas in the States, no such thing. There are differences, various things from bank laws to whatever have you, but yeah, they certainly haven't come across with the bail-in legislation in case the shit hits the fan economically.
Yep. So we've got your response here to Traveling Prepper, the email question from the last show there.
Oh yeah. One more thing I just wanted to cover. Because I
sure.
I did an acronym and I wasn't sure if you knew what it was. Marijuana usage. We could talk about that.
Yep,
So
sure.
this can come in. I'm not saying I use
Oh,
it.
here it is. I got it. Yeah.
I certainly don't. But you know what? Everything from growing as a barter item to growing as a pain reliever, whatever have you, for those people that are interested in using it,
Yep.
definitely
Hey,
still.
that's legal now.
Yeah, I mean, some people in the states that live in certain states, I think Colorado, Washington State, and everything else, state-wise, it's legal, but it's still a federal crime
Still
in the
federal.
states.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, if you have a marijuana card in a place like Washington State, you cannot get firearms because you've committed a felony. Whereas
That's a little bit different how it works.
yeah, whereas in Canada, it's legalized, and it doesn't seem to affect your ability to own firearms or anything else. It's kind of a less of a big deal. I guess more of a conservative mindset in the States from that perspective, as far as recreational drug use. I mean, I think I'm not accepting of it, but a lot of people are. So hey, you know what? Whatever floats your boat.
Well, yeah.
But so yeah, it's more. I won't say legalized because they didn't legalize it. They decriminalized. They regulated it. They didn't decriminalize it.
No, so still a criminal offense according to the federal side of things, but the local side says it's okay.
Yeah,
that's an interesting system. But
yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah. So, response to Traveling Pepper you mentioned there. So, Traveling Pepper sent us an email last week, and he wanted me to talk about my travel-friendly EDC. So I got messaging him back and forth, and I basically got called out. So I took a bunch of pictures after I emptied out my bag, and I actually showed him everything I had with me. And so outside of the usual clothes and toiletries, I basically showed him exactly what I had in my bag, and he gave me a couple of suggestions, which was good. Yeah. And so I dumped out of my carry-on bag, and it might be a long-winded thing, but bear with me for a sec here.
Go for it.
All right. So as far as the bag itself goes, I have a 511 brand Rush 24. It's kind of the medium-size bag that 511 products put out. I have to admit, probably over the course of the next 5 podcasts, I'll probably be talking about lifetime warranties with various things. I'm a sucker for them. Yep. And the problem is, I think overall it was probably a bad idea to pick that backpack to bring with me for work as a general rule, because I basically don't check a bag either whenever I travel. As far as the gray man theory goes, it's an idiotic move because as cool as my Ragnarok tactical badge is on it, that I try and pass off as a Norse compass and everything else, and people don't understand what it means, but it basically makes you stand out from the crowd. And so what I should have probably done was get a Swiss Gear backpack from Costco. So instead of $150, it would have been $30, and I probably just replaced every couple of years if it got worn out.
Yeah, and then you're mixing in with the crowd as well, right?
Yeah, and the problem is, so my 511 bag, I use it every, at least 15 days a month, and so it started to wear out. I contacted them for their lifetime warranty. It turns out excessive wear does not get covered, so their lifetime warranty is not that good. So, but the bag itself is great. So, anyways, that's what it's all sitting in. So, as far as items inside my everyday travel friendly EDC. I just have a baseball cap, which we use for sheltering from the sun or whatever have you. But I also put a visor-mounted flashlight, courtesy of the dollar store, which uses the CR2032 batteries. So I can basically put a flashlight up there, use hands-free. You're going to see a few things, a bit of a theme going on here. So dollar store expandable mini towels, which can be used for everything from toilet paper to wiping your hands to whatever have you, wiping the sweat off your brow even, if need be. A bunch of free stuff that I pride myself on finding as best I can. There's a preparedness, emergency preparedness stand at the local fair here last summer, and they were actually giving away everything from space blankets to whistles to whatever have you. So
giving it away.
Yeah, so I grabbed a fox whistle for everybody in the house, and so I put that in there. There's actually a bike trail map for the city of Vancouver, which is kind of my home base of operations as well. And it shows you all the trails that basically cars can't go on, but people on foot and on bike can. So it actually lists out the actual bike trail map. So that was kind of a neat thing. It was free as well, available.
That's great. That's something that people wouldn't generally think of. Everybody focuses on just using a vehicle to get out of the spot that they're in, but bike trails and pedestrian trails is a good idea.
And not that I would advocate it, but I'm just saying, worst case scenario, if you had to take a motorbike down one of those trails, hey, it's a bike trail. Yep. It's an option. Earplugs for free as well. I get them from work for free, but it just, never hurts to have a couple handy for various loud noises. Actually, believe it or not, Facebook I'm not a big fan of Facebook, but hey, I was at a computer seminar the other day, and they were giving away this like a screwdriver that had a bunch of bits in it that fit into the handle, and it had a flashlight on the end of it, and actually it's kind of a hidden multi-tool that nobody seems to notice on airport security, which is interesting. So I got a few screwdrivers with me, and they're very tiny. I mean, hard to find anyway. I got a sewing kit courtesy of the hotel, as well as a bar of soap, 2 Bic lighters, and I use a zip tie to wrap around the gas pedal so it doesn't let off all the gas while it's sitting in the suitcase.
Smart.
Quality sunglasses, whether you want your Ray-Bans or whatever have you, just make sure you get quality ones, not dollar store ones. My first aid kit. I know I'm going to catch hell from Andrew on this one, but it's missing a few things. But I've got the standard ouch pouch, everything from band-aids to everyday use to things that come in handy when you're traveling, like Immodium, eye and ear drops, like a polysporin that works for both. Because if you get an earache and you got to go traveling, you don't want to have that happen.
Oh.
Yeah. Moleskin for long distance walking, hiking, whatever. I try and go do a big hike every day while I'm on layover. And then nail files, multiple uses there as well. Tylenol, just for obviously fever, whatever have you. Benzyl calcium chloride, I do believe. BZK wipes. Anyways, they're good for disinfecting, cleaning, whatever have you. Inside my first aid kit, I've also got rubber gloves, standard stuff like triangle bandage, cough medicine, just, like pills just to help out. Pressure dressing, large gauze, medical tape, blister band-aids just to cover up a blister, AQUA tabs for water disinfection, and it's going to sound funny, but a feminine napkin, just because I didn't have a Israeli bandage or anything else. I just threw that in there.
There you go.
A couple other neat things I found along my travels here is a Lucky Duck mini duct tape roll. So it was actually really flat, but it holds a bunch of duct tape.
Neat.
Yeah, some compass cards, which are like the local subway system. So you just get a couple prepaid compass cards, so you don't have to worry about cash then. Tenacious tape. Have you ever heard of this stuff?
I have not. I was going to ask.
So what it is, it's available on Amazon and a few other stores, and basically you use it to repair backpacks. And this stuff sticks to everything and does not come off. So if you have to fix a hole in a backpack or whatever have you, that's the stuff to have. So I use it actually along the bottom of that backpack where it wore out and they wouldn't repair it, and it's worked out well. It's not cheap, but it works great.
Oh, awesome.
I've also got a flashlight, and I make sure that it uses, whenever I put a flashlight in my bag, it has to use either a AAA or a AA, because obviously it can be found everywhere.
Yep, readily available.
Yeah, readily available batteries. So I have a flashlight and 3 spare batteries, usually just 1 to go in it, because I don't leave a battery in the flashlight. So I usually have 3 handy. 550 cord, a bracelet, and what I call my justification book. Because if you're going to have 550 cord in a bag, they probably generally are going to ask you about it. But if you have a book saying you want to learn how to if you want to have a book explaining why you want to use 550 cord to knit stuff, that's always something handy to have.
Oh, there you go.
Zip ties, which of course have multiple uses. A real watch, meaning like actual, not an iPhone, but an actual real wrist-mounted watch that's battery powered. Because iPhones do wear, the battery dies pretty quick, whereas a watch will last for months.
Oh, absolutely.
Currency. I think a couple other people have mentioned it as well, but I carry lots of currency, like hard cash. But interestingly enough, I had a 5-hour power outage when I was in the East Coast about a month ago. And even with cash, they wouldn't take it because a lot of the systems will not work without power. So a lot of the minimum wage employees just didn't know how to deal with cash on a power outage basis, I guess.
Oh, that's interesting. You would think that cash would be no problem, but I guess all the computers are out. You can't scan the barcode. If you can't scan the barcode, you can't put the product in the computer. If you can't put the product in the computer, it can't do the math for you, so I can't give you change.
Well, basic math is a problem too, of course. Interestingly enough, a couple of workarounds for the up until recently when they had the knife ban for Canada is I had a touch knife. Do you remember those Olfa touch knives that they used to you could like stick out the blade about ½ inch and a little blade would pop out?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so I used to have one of those, but then I came across this ceramic touch knife, and so it cost about $11, but it's actually like dull to the fingers, but it cuts through everything. So it's actually a very interesting thing to have. So a ceramic touch knife, some sporks from Mora, like the same people that make the knives.
The wonderful sporks.
Yeah, a bottle and can opener, lots of snacks, so nuts, the Kind bars, Epic bars, Susie's Good Fats, Kirkland protein bars, and then I also put a plastic tube in there, which you could pass off as a straw, I suppose. But basically it can be used as anything from a drinking straw to a blunt weapon to a loaded fist or whatever have you. Not that I would recommend that in normal times, but I'm just saying it's the option.
Yeah, you've got it. Yeah, if you need it, it's there.
Yeah. The other thing, if you're not going to the U.S., currently the law in Canada is you are allowed to carry onto a airplane a knife with less than 2.36 inch or 6 centimeter blade. So if you want to do that, you certainly can.
Well, there you go. Not a bad idea to have something small versus nothing at all.
Yep. And so the other thing is traveling prepper told me that a couple of things I should have added, and I kind of actually had a discussion with it. He said a Mylar blanket would be a good idea, and I was like, well, I have hotel blankets. He's like, yeah, but it gives you that extra layer, and if it does get really cold out and power goes out for a while, that's a little extra one with reflecting your heat probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, and they're small and easy to pack into.
Yeah, and then the other interesting thing was he showed me is the N95 masks. He's got a fold flat version, and the brand name is called the Aura 1870. Have you ever seen those before?
I have, yeah.
And so it's interesting the fact that mostly when you put an N95 mask in the actual suitcase, a day later it's bent to crap and it doesn't work. Yep. But these ones you could put fold flat and they'd probably work.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the ones that I've got in my kit are fold flat as well. So they're handy for that because they still get a little bit bent if you've got some heavy stuff sitting on them, but they're still usable if you got to pull them out. Yeah,
so I guess number one rule, if the shit hits the fan does happen and you're in a hotel room, don't forget to rate it before you leave. So make sure you grab your face cloths, blankets, coffee filters for water purification, whatever have you. So always before you give up any position, make sure you rate it for what you need.
Absolutely. And anytime you're at a hotel, take them up on the free items they're going to give you. Throw them in your kit.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm missing stuff, but that's basically everything I could kind of pick out as a preparedness item out of my suitcase. So.
Yeah, so just to throw out there for anybody listening, if you want to send in some items that you have in your kits or some suggestions for additions to the kit list here that Ian's read out, flip an email into feedback@prepperpodcast.ca, and that's feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Let us know what's in your kit, what you'd add, maybe what you'd subtract, what you like, what you don't like. We'll take all kinds of feedback. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. We like to hear it all. But we'll get into the podcast challenge.
Yeah, so I mean, last week I kind of had the guys go out and spend a bunch of money, so I don't think it's fair to make them do it 2 weeks in a row. So I guess this one's more of a mental exercise. So I actually took some inspiration from, I do believe it was Canadian Gun Nuts. They were actually talking about this. So if you had 2 days, even 2 hours notice till shit hit the fan, what would you go out and buy? So I guess our little podcast challenge is to come up with a list of something that you're critically short of. So whether it be gear, tactical or practical, beans, band-aids, bullets, whatever have you, I guess you can score yourself some brownie points if you want to start recording the cheapest price available for each item and then wait for sales. But just think about what you're really critically short of as far as a beginner's inventory. If that sounds good.
Yeah. So start the lists up and send it into feedback@prepperpodcast.ca, and then we'll discuss everybody's lists on the next episode as far as what they've put together. If you find some good deals while you're doing this, let us know, and we'll put it out there as well in show notes so everybody else can take advantage of the deals as well.
Cool. So it looks like we got some feedback there, I guess.
Got some feedback, yeah. So I'll read off an email here that we've received from Andrew, who is the host of the Canadian Patriot podcast. So it reads here, good evening, Eric and Ian. Andrew from Canadian Patriot Podcast here. I travel a fair bit for work, especially in 2018. I still tend to have most of my EDC with me when I'm on the road. Day to day, I work in information technology, and it's not uncommon for me to have to travel with tools. When I do get to check a bag with screwdrivers and other things I can't carry on, that'll include a less expensive pocket knife, usually a small Gerber. The rest of the time, I'm knifeless. My regular travel is US and Canada, with the majority now being Canada only. I have a bag that I always have for work that includes the majority of my EDC gear. The bag contents stay the same from day to day and don't change much when I'm traveling. The prepper-specific stuff follows. The stuff I know that my coworkers generally do not carry, I also carry several $100s in cash, more when I travel than when I'm at home. So he carries the 511 Rush 12 backpack, HSGI multi-mission medical taco. So he's got a cat tourniquet, quick clot combat gauze, 6-inch Israeli bandage. He's got an airway and lube, a Fox seal, decompression needle and shears, Sharpie, which a lot of people overlook, which would be really handy, especially for your tourniquet if you got to jot a date and time down on it. And a set of gloves. He carries a Phoenix LD22 flashlight, spare AA batteries, a 2500 milliamp hour solar power bank. What else we got here? A Belkin 3 outlets, Surge Plus Mini travel swivel charger, surge protector with the dual USB ports, a 1 liter Nalgene. It keeps it empty for crossing security at the airports and fills it up afterwards. 2,000 calories of food, trail mix, beef jerky, licorice, snack sizes or small bags, toiletries, paper notebook, and assorted pens. I'm usually somewhere for a week or more, so I'll buy food to eat and restock what I keep in my bag. I'll also pick up a few bottles of water to keep in the hotel room and keep my water bottle full to keep it with me. If it's just a day trip, I don't bother with the extra food or water. I also keep printed copies of my paperwork in my notebook, hotel, car, airline. It's worth mentioning that I do a virtual recce of any site that I've not been to before using Google Maps and Street View. By the time I travel, I already have planned a primary alternate route from the airport to the hotel to work locations. I find nearby restaurants, grocery stores, and hospitals. I print Google Maps with routes to points of interest. All this is backup to my phone. Regarding hotel rooms, I request a second and third floor rooms away from the elevators. This is high enough to discourage casual break-and-enters from outside access and low enough to easily escape in the event of a fire or other emergency. I also walk the ground floor of the hotel prior to check-in to assess any unusual activity, open doors, loiterers, etc. After check-in, I make sure the room is all set and then walk to the parking lot using 2 different routes, whether I need that many trips to the car or not. The point is to become familiar with the route and identify any obstacles or anything unusual. This probably sounds extreme to the casual outsider, but nothing I travel with has caused problems with the airport security, TSA, or CBSA. Trip planning usually saves me time as I already know where to eat, so I don't spend time trying to find a place when I'm on site. The extra work in the hotel only takes a few minutes longer. And that's signed off Andrew from the Canadian Patriot podcast.
Awesome idea with the exits and scouting out the ground floor and even getting the lower floor hotel rooms. Definitely solid point there.
Oh, absolutely. I was saying just before we started the show when we were chatting there that I travel quite significantly for work and I'm in hotels all the time. And there's a few points here that I didn't consider. The second or third floor for sure is something I'm going to be starting to request when I'm checking into hotels, and even just walking the hotel and figuring out a second exit or a second route to get out is a great idea. And whether or not you got to bring more stuff in from the car or not, just walking it to see different routes and just know what's available to you as far as getting out if your primary exit is blocked or somehow restricted.
Absolutely solid point, and even checking out the sketchy characters and getting the second floor to avoid the break-in. I mean, yeah, all solid points. I mean, from an operational perspective, he's on fire with this email for sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The great points to consider, great things to think of. I like the breakout of the list of stuff he's got in his kit, and I apologize if I pronounce some of it wrong, because I probably did, and I'll probably hear about it, but that's okay.
Well, that'll happen next episode, right?
Absolutely, because we got him on next episode for first aid.
I guess it takes us down to shoutouts.
It does.
So, wait a minute, did we skip the iTunes review?
Oh, you know what? We did. Actually, we got it down on episode closing. So we'll do shoutouts, and then we'll get into the closing, and we'll do the iTunes review.
Yeah, sounds good. So I got a couple shoutouts for myself. Vic Prepper 11, like I mentioned, he came up for the face-to-face and with a little tour of the homestead here. And fantastic guy. Pleasure to see him again, and just wanted to say hi. Also, the traveling prepper, he always keeps me on my toes with good challenges and questions for sure.
Awesome. So we'll get into some iTunes reviews. We've got actually some people have been rating the show, so it's much appreciated. We're up to 4 5-star reviews. We've got 1 4-star review, and we have a new written review. This one is from Tim TJ. It was put in December 11th, 2018. It reads, guys, good start to a podcast and love the Canadian perspective and experience for novice preppers. I'm enjoying the show. Any discussions planned for off-grid living? That's a good point. I think we'll have to do a show based on off-grid living.
Yeah, that's certainly an episode unto itself.
Absolutely it is. We can talk for at least an hour, if not longer, on that topic, I'm sure. So what else do we have? So for listener email and review, that was the email there from Andrew from the Canadian Prepper podcast that we read off. And he wasn't really sending in any questions as far as that goes. He's more making some statements.
Yeah. So other than that, I guess it was nice to see the iTunes reviews for sure.
Yeah, it's nice to see that those are starting to pick up and people are coming in and starting to rate, because that helps us huge as far as getting new listeners, getting the podcast out there. The more reviews we can get, the better. So if you haven't thrown a review in yet, please do check it out on iTunes. Throw a rating in there. Leave a written review. That helps out even more, because that way people looking for the podcast and seeing what it's all about can actually see what you think about it. Put in what you think about it, good, bad, whatever you want to put in. Just we ask that it be an honest review. And then as well, any other application that you're using to listen to the podcast on, if you could throw a review in there, that would be greatly appreciated.
Well, I guess that's about it tonight.
I think so. With that, I'll bring episode number 7 of the Canadian Prepper podcast to an end. Ian, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me at theislandretreat@gmail.com, and as mentioned on YouTube at the Island Retreat channel for sure.
That's where we are now.
Yeah, as far as the show goes, you can find the podcast itself on iTunes, Podbean, and Spotify. Please help us out. Take a few minutes, submit a review. It really helps people find the podcast. You can find us at prepperpodcast.ca, and our YouTube live shows that help us create the podcast are now available. Just please click the notifications tab on the Island Retreat, and it gives you alerts when we're going to go live.
All right. And for myself, you can check me out at rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there on the live chat, which actually is currently not working. So don't get me on the live chat. I got to figure out some bugs with it. But you can flip me an email at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. And thanks for joining us, and tune in next episode where we're going to talk about some basic and advanced first aid training. We're going to have Andrew from the Canadian Patriot podcast on, and he's going to talk to us about all kinds of different first aid training and availability and kit and gear, and it's going to be a great show. So until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.